Today you become a 16th century Inca high priest of Inti, the sun. At 50 I watched white iron men pry the gold sheets off the walls of Cusco. The god, it seems, abandoned us first. I am 8. The Cusco dawn is so cold it turns blue. My father walks me across the temple threshold and tells me that from this day on the sun is my real father, not him. The old priest drapes a white alpaca wool shawl over my shoulders and calls me a Yacha Cheek apprentice for the first time. I do not understand the word, but I bow anyway. The temple keeps a small herd of llamas, and we boys take turns feeding them every morning. I crouch with an armful of hay, and a llama smears its wet mouth across my cheek. At 9, I see the gold wall of Coricancha for the first time. In the noon sun, the whole wall seems to melt into liquid light, and I am genuinely afraid I have gone blind. Noble children must learn to speak the sacred Quechua language. If our tongues stumble, an elder taps them with a thin bamboo rod. My tongue stays sore for an entire year. Before my mother leaves, she tucks a small woven pouch of coca leaves into my hand. Chew them, she says, and you will not feel alone. At 10, I learn what that word means. At 12, I begin to learn the quipu. Colored cotton cords pass through my fingers and become a ledger, recording every sack of maize and llama in the empire. At night, I climb the observation platform with the star priest. He points to the milky band overhead and says that is Mayu, the river of the gods, the path the dead walk. The star priest says the sun dies twice each year. At the winter solstice, we light bonfires and bind a gold sun effigy with cord, begging it not to wander too far away. At 14, I enter the inner sanctum of Coricancha. The face the gold wall throws back at me is not mine. It looks as if the sun has borrowed my features for a moment. The old priest teaches me to read the heavens. Never go to war when the moon is chipped. Sacrifice a llama when Venus rises. These are rules built up over centuries. At 15, I must walk the high pilgrim path, carrying coca leaves and a small wooden idol on my back. I trek 7 days to a sacred lake belonging to Pachamama. By the lake, an old llama herder offers me a wooden cup of chicha, fermented maize beer. He tells me the gods up there can hear every step my feet make on the trail. On the way back, a heavy snowstorm finds me. I tuck the wooden idol inside my cloak. Whenever I think of my mother's words, I bite down on a single coca leaf and walk on. At 16, I lead my first Inti Raymi Sun festival. When the drums begin, my hands are shaking, but the moment I open my mouth, my voice steadies and the words flow. The Sapa Inca walks over and lays a hand on my shoulder. The emperor's hand is heavy. He says, "You are like your father." That day, I do not let myself cry in public. I take charge of the offering ledgers at Coricancha. Maize, dried peppers, and dyed wool arrive from the 4 directions every day, and I record each delivery in quipu knots. By 18, the empire stretches in 4 directions. We call it Tawanisiu, which means the 4 regions joined as one, the land where every road leads back to Cusco. At 20, I am raised to full priest. They hang the gold sun disk pectoral around my neck. It is so heavy it feels like wearing a second self, and I have to walk with my head bowed. At 22, I learn to read the clouds. When dark cloud sits unmoving on Sakante Peak for 3 days, a flash flood arrives within a week, and the village must climb higher. At 24, a new emperor is crowned. All of Cusco is splashed with llama blood and flower petals, and I walk at the very front of the procession with the great gold cup. That coronation night, I sacrifice a pure white llama. Its eyes are blue. It kneels without struggling, almost willingly. At the time, I read it as the most favorable possible omen. Tribute from the 4 regions piles up in the plaza of Cusco. Dried fish from the north, copper from the south, brilliant quetzal feathers carried in from the eastern jungles. Those years were the empire's golden age. Every year I led Inti Raymi, and every year I truly believed the sun was hearing us, answering us, watching over our valleys. At 28, a strange thing appears in the heavens. A new light hangs in the northern sky, far too bright and never blinking. The star priest tells me that is not a star. At 30, a plague rolls south from the coast. Villages empty one after another. I chew through a whole pouch of coca leaves and still cannot get rid of the dry cough. The emperor falls sick. I keep watch beside his bed for 30 straight nights, listening to him in fever call out for his long-dead grandfather. I pretend not to understand. The emperor dies without naming an heir. I know what is coming. 2 princes, 2 armies, and only one empire left for them to tear apart between themselves. Civil war burns for 3 full years. I light incense in the temple while generals from both sides come in turn to pray for victory. Which side the god favored, I truly cannot say. At 33, the star priest rushes in. A second comet has appeared in the southern sky. He tells me, its tail pointing straight at Cusco. I tell him to be quiet about it. A trade caravan brings rumors from the north. On the coast, men with long beards have appeared, riding beasts as large as deer, their bodies covered in white iron skin. That night, I open the oldest prophecies. The ancestors wrote that one day pale gods would return from across the sea. I read the line 3 times. I do not say it aloud. At 36, the new emperor Atahualpa finally wins the civil war. I go to crown him, but when I look into his eyes during the ritual, the light has already gone out of them. Soon after the coronation, the coast rumors turn into urgent dispatches. The White Iron Men are marching inland. The emperor summons me to ride with him to Cajamarca. At 40, I ride with the emperor to Cajamarca. Strangers stand in the plaza there. Their skin is pale as a sick man's, and their beards curl on their faces like raw wool. Their leader is named Pizarro. He hands the emperor a black book. The emperor leafs through it and drops it on the stones. Then a flash, and the gunfire begins from the colonnade. The plaza becomes a slaughterhouse. I press myself behind a stone pillar and watch the gold-armored royal guard fall in waves. Not a single one of them escapes the square alive. They lock the emperor in a mud-walled room. He promises to fill it with gold for his ransom. With my own hands, I pry the gold sheets from the temple walls and pack them up. The room fills with gold, and they kill him anyway. That year is 1533 by their reckoning. I am 43 years old when the empire's neck is broken. I do not weep. I fold the ceremonial robes neatly, then burn the quipu cords one by one to ash so they cannot be seized and read. The god is no longer here in this place. At 45, Cusco itself falls. They charge into Coricancha, pry the entire gold wall apart with iron bars, and divide the chunks among themselves by weight on a scale. The gold is melted into ingots and loaded onto llamas. I watch the great sun disk pectoral run into a glowing puddle in the furnace. The second time in my life, I want to go blind. At 47, I retreat with a small remnant past the snow line into Vilcabamba. The mountains are bitterly cold, but the White Iron Men do not enjoy climbing this high after us. On the high plateau, we rebuild a small temple. There is no gold left, only stones piled bare. I light incense anyway, and the smoke still rises straight toward the sun above. At 48, I begin teaching my grandchildren how to tie the quipu. They cannot tell all the colors apart yet, but their tiny fingers grip the cotton cords with surprising fierceness. In sacred Quechua, I tell them the stories of Pachamama, the Earth Mother. By the end of the tale, the children have curled asleep on the blankets, and I quietly let out a long breath. At 49, word reaches us from the lower valleys. Vilcabamba has fallen too. I take the very last quipu cord and bury it under my grandfather's flat ancestral stone. At 50, I sit in the doorway of the small mountain temple and let the late sun warm my face. The god is still up there in the sky. He simply does not listen to Cusco anymore. That was the life of a 16th century Inca high priest of the sun. The god never left the sky. The people who could hear him were the ones who left. For the next life, vote in the comments. A. An Aztec priest, or B. A corrupt French Revolution noble. This is fictional dramatization for entertainment only. If you have ever kept a temple no one believes in anymore, leave a comment below.